It is my pleasure to introduce my friend Federico Castillo, who will give us a talk tonight on the Lattice Cuba countermark, variants, and travels, which is a slightly different title than he gave me before, but whatever works.
Okay. All right. So as I said, my numismatic loyalty lies in Latin America and the United States. In the United States, I don't collect coins except that you give them as a gift to me. I will take them. But I collect tokens, mostly border Texan and California tokens where that are bilingual, Spanish, English. And of course, I collect Latin American tokens. I do collect Latin American coins. And so every time I present to this group, I try to kind of unify both of those loyalties, and hopefully today is one of those days. Okay. So first, we're going to be talking about the Cuban Lattice countermark, 1841, but we're just going to put a little bit of context into that countermark for both Latin America and Cuba and California in particular. We're going to discuss the countermark and his variants, and then we're going to look at the 2 or 3 variants that I know that might be of interest to the members of this group. So the continent, as you see that map on the left, of course, is stolen from the internet. Oh, sorry, borrowed, because we're recording. Shows the viceroyalties of the Kingdom of Spain in Latin America, as well as that one of Brazil for the Portuguese. And as you can see, the continent was divided into big chunks of land. The viceroyalty going from south to north of the Plata, which is today's Argentina, Bolivia, and some other parts of Chile. Then you have the viceroyalty of Peru, the viceroyalty of Nueva Granada, and up north, the viceroyalty of New Spain, or what is today Mexico. Mexico still looks like I was before the Guadalupe Hidalgo Treaty. And in between, what you see there, if I may use my, you see in between here is Central America. Central America was not a viceroyalty. It was not large enough, or they just didn't drink enough tea or whatever they drank at the moment, wine, to divide it properly. So they left it right in between. That's the captaincy of Guatemala, general captaincy of Guatemala, that was today Central America. To the right, what we see is the American continent, or part of it, post-independence. So what you see is a fraction or a continent that is split into many pieces, except that Mexico was kept pretty in fairly size in relation to how it was prior to 1821, when it was the independence of Central America, and Mexico earlier, although on the same day. Oh, we will see in a second why it matters. Why it matters, what we see here are 2 maps of the Americas. The map on the left shows several possible routes to travel to the other side, if you will, from the east coast of the Americas to the west coast. Prior to the discovery of gold in California in 1849, there was not a hell of a lot of reasons to go to the west coast of the American continent. The place was desolated. Mexico dominated that part for the most part through its ownership of what is today California, Washington, Oregon, parts of Utah. So there was really not a hell of a lot of reason for people from New England to travel to the west. Once the discovery of gold took place, the story changed. Of course, there were riches to be made, panning and digging for gold. And so out of the sudden, there was a problem. How do we go to the other side? And so there were basically 3 routes. One is you go right through the heart of the North American part of the American continent, and you reach San Francisco. That was risky. There's a lot of bandits, if you will. Of course, there were the Native Americans who were not happy to have white people crossing over their land. There was a lot of violence, and a lot of people didn't make it. And we have a lot of stories, of course, about this. But more importantly, it took a lot of time. Route number 2 was to go all the way down to Cape Horn from whatever it is that you took off from. It could be New Orleans, New York, although it was mostly New York, this area. And you went all the way down and then up north to San Francisco. That took about 6 months. There were 2 alternative routes that took about 3 months off that trip that I just indicated. And that was through the Panamanian Isthmus. The other second option was through Nicaragua. Okay, so what this dotted line, that now is not dotted, indicates is that route. So you would take off from Boston or some other Eastern New Englander port, and then you will go either through the Panamanian Isthmus or through Nicaragua. The route, the Nicaraguan route, was actually, as we will see later, dominated by Mr. Cornelius Vanderbilt. It implied that you will land on the eastern coast of Nicaragua. You will then get on a small coach ride. You will go through the San Juan River, through the Nicaragua Lake. Then you will come on the western side of Nicaragua, and you will take a ship all the way to San Francisco, or more often than not with stops in Acapulco and other places. The map on the right is just an explanation of what this route is with more detail, the places where the ship may port to pick up food and other items. Most importantly, it worked the other way around. Gold from California, travel all the way down from Cape Horn through Cape Horn, or it went through the Nicaragua route or the Panamanian Isthmus. And so this will become kind of a fun thing to remember about 6 slides from now. I just mentioned that Mr. Cornelius Vanderbilt was the person or the individual who owned this route, the one that went through the Nicaragua, not the Panamanian, but the Nicaraguan landmass through the Lake of Nicaragua using the San Juan River and then off to San Francisco. Gold made it back to the west that way as well. And we have had, Michael has had talks about this issue before and others. So, this become important because during this time, there was one small detail, which was Cuba was not independent. Cuba was still part of the Kingdom of Spain. It was holding tough from all the independent movements. And so you see things like this, for example, you will see this in newspapers announcing one particular company, a steamship, the steamship Nicaragua will sail on Friday, March the 23rd, 1849, blah, blah, blah. It had 2 jackasses on board, I assume. I don't know, that's what it says right here. And it cost a hell of a lot. It was $90. If you have made gold in California, you didn't care. You paid that amount of money to get back keys as soon as you could to spend the money. So I just have to say that even if this thing was called the California Steam Navigation Company, okay, it was one that had to pay Mr. Vanderbilt a right of pass through Nicaragua to go to back east to the East Coast in the United States. So what's up with the Cuban Lattice countermark? And I will show you a few pieces of those. I'm just keeping the momentum, the guessing game for later. Why do we have the Cuban lattice? I split that into two reasons, financial and political. The first reason is that those with debt in Europe, particularly in Spain, even though there were countries that are being independent. In 1841, again, most Latin American countries had achieved independence, except Cuba. But they were heavily indebted to banks and financial houses back in Holland and Spain. They needed to pay these debts, and so they needed to pay with gold. There was plenty of gold in the Americas at the moment, so no problem with that. They say we are going to send the gold out. This was illegal to send out of the Americas, but the Americas were independent. The problem was everybody who went to Europe on a ship from the Americas, even if you were sailing from South America, you had to stop in Cuba. So Cuba, the king, made it illegal to have gold coins from Cuba to the Americas. In addition, all those subjects of the king that were living in Cuba were still under the direct control of the king, and the king had made a prohibition of paying the debts in gold. The king was between a rock and a hard place because he needed that gold over there, but at the same time, he needed that gold in the Americas to keep an influence on commerce in the Americas, even though they were independent countries. So regardless, the debt had to be paid. And so sending gold overseas resulted in a change of the value of gold relative to the silver. It went from 16 pesos fuertes to 17 pesos. Obviously, because gold being scarce, people needed more silver to pay for 1 ounce of gold in this case. Sorry. Oops. As gold became scarcer, then those holding debt abroad started using silver, resulting in silver being then scarce. And the silver that left the Cuban island then became very, very desirable in the United States, France, and other countries that will either melt it, put a countermark on it, do whatever to make it legal to circulate in their own territories. So Cuba was bleeding coins. How did they solve this scarcity of coins in the island? Well, as the colonies start becoming independent, most of the silver circulated in the islands originated, I should say, I left that sentence there and finished, in the Americas. You know, Central America had a mint, Mexico had a large number of mints. There was a mint in Potosí, there was a mint in Lima, La Plata, and so on and so forth. So Cuba didn't have that luxury. Cuba didn't have silver. And so the way they solved this was they start importing coins from Spain. It was prohibited to export what is called moneda sevillana or Sevillian coins to the Americas because the king didn't want to mess around with the purity of the silver and the exact measure of silver content. In the Americas, there were quite a few problems and quite a few mints that indicated that the coins didn't have the weight or the silver content. So the king didn't want to import those into Spain. So he basically, so the people in Cuba then, what they end up saying is, okay, we're going to take the coins from the motherland and we're going to use them in Cuba. They were not happy with this. The king was not happy with this because now Spain was bleeding silver. So you see, it's all about the movement of the coins. It was about what the coins were needed. And actually, it was all about unnecessary regulations. Of course, the king of Spain, whoever, and as we will see, it will change over time, did not believe in free trade, otherwise we wouldn't be talking about this. It was a very mercantilist mentality at the moment. Okay. So you end up having a huge amount of coins, silver coins, coming from Spain to Cuba to satisfy the scarcity of Cuban coinage at the moment. So Cuba couldn't get coins from the Americas, so they took it from the motherland. The king wasn't happy about this. These coins were called Sevillanas. And the reason they were called Sevillanas, meaning the coins from the motherland that arrived into Cuba, was that most of the trade decisions, most of the decisions made about who was going to be the captain of a particular ship, who was going to be a governor in a particular place, was made in the Casa de Sevilla, or what is known as the Casa de Contratación, which was basically an instrument of the monopoly that the king wanted to exercise in the remaining colonies, Spanish colonies. He held on to Cuba because Cuba had a very specific strategic geographical position. Things had to go through that area, and he thought that by holding on to Cuba, it was as independence had not happened. Of course, the picture to the right there is not the Casa de Sevilla. In fact, my understanding is that at this particular point in time, maybe Sergio is an expert on these things, we don't know where Casa de Sevilla was. What you see there is the building where the archives are actually held in regards to Casa de Sevilla, hence the name Sevillana coinage. The end result, of course, was, like I say, that the government of Cuba, or the governor, prohibited the import of pesetas sevillanas, or 2 reales coins mostly, from the motherland. But what he needed to recognize that, like I say, to supply the scarcity of coins that the island has been bleeding due to debt payments, they needed to recognize that the coins that were there to stay. So how did they validate it? They came up with the Lattice countermark. The Latin countermark was authorized in 1841 for those in possession of the pesetas sevillanas, or coins made in the motherland. Remember that most coins, silver coins, colonial type, made in the American continent, means were either columnarios or bust coins, or bust type. Everybody had 9 days to turn them in, and those 9 days were hell. I must say that thing took place in September, but on May 30th, the protocol to execute the countermark on coins is approved, meaning they will go by regions. They will go to different regions and collect the coins, give the person a piece of paper, and return the coins back with the countermark. The actual process, this, like I say, takes place in September of 1841. There are 50 dies authorized, 20 to be used in Havana, Cuba, 15 in Santiago, and 15 in Puerto Príncipe, or Port-Prince. Those were the 3 commercial access, if you will, of the island. And so they took these dies to, the Havana Mint was very well established, I should say. So was the Puerto Príncipe Mint. The Santiago Mint was a so-so operation. They had to go through a lot of improvement of equipment to be able to do the countermark. As you will see, it's extremely simple. The coinage minted in the motherland then become warning. Well, I already spoke about this. Became the norm in Cuba, given that they were similar to the columnarias. There were 2 types, the 2 reales pieces, which were of 4 varieties or 4 types: Charles III, Charles IV, Ferdinand VII, and Joseph Napoleon. We will see them in a second. And the coins of Bellon, which were 4 reales coin with different silver content and sometimes altogether different metal. So what did a countermark look like? It looked exactly like this. And surprisingly enough, the official decree to authorize this countermark just stated that it should be a small square with 2 lines on each side. So 1, 2, 1, 2. The countermark did not specify size, did not specify anything else. Interestingly enough, most of them have this very small sort of circle there. I don't think it was on the die. I think it was it might have been on the die. I don't know, but certainly it shouldn't be there because it was not specified in the description. It was, and we will see that some countermarks just do not have that circle right there in between. And feel free, you have questions, you feel free to stop me. What you see there is a 2 reales. Look, a beautiful date, 1776, Carolus III. This comes from the Madrid Mint. Let me be specific about this. There is no Lattice countermark on any colonial piece made in the Americas, period. So that's a 1776. Somebody like that, they offered me some money for that. This is another variety, as I indicated. This is the variety for, this is a vellón piece because it's 4 reales. It is not a columnaria. You don't see that here. You see the Bourbon seal, of course, the Castile and the lion, Castilla and Leon. The bust here is that of Joseph Napoleon, who was Napoleon's, the one Napoleon we know the most, brother, who when he dominated Spain briefly put his brother in the throne. His brother was a lawyer, actually. No, not much to do there, but he knew how to dress fancy, that's for sure. Okay, so that's another type. I don't know the year here because I cannot make up this digit here. I'm speculating it's a 13th. Well, that means it's the last year of his reign. But I look at that very, very careful, and I couldn't make it up except that I am speculating it's a 3. And if you see, the little circle in between is barely seen there. Okay, so that's the first type. As I say, trying to move my screen around. Okay. The second type of the Lattice countermark is in Costa Rica coinage. What you see here is that in Costa Rica, there was also a scarcity of coinage. Whoops, giving away the game here. There was Costa Rica from independence all the way up to the, I would say, well, our mint really never worked properly. There were always times when it was closed. Either there was no personnel to operate it. There was no metal. Certainly silver was an issue. Gold, there was some gold, but not on the quantities that you will have seen in other colonies. So what you see here to the right, to the left, is a vellón piece of 4 reales with a countermark on both sides. This is a Napoleon bust type of 1812. And you see 2 countermarks. You see this one here, and you see this one here. Every coin had the same on both sides. This is, I will speculate, this is a saber tree, but maybe others with more knowledge will correct me. Here you say Costa Rica at 2 here for a 2 reales piece. So a 4 reales piece was countermarked to circulate as a 4 reales piece, and you see the same thing here. So this particular side of the coin here, it looks much better. The tree is more clear. The legend is much better. And then we have Costa Rica here 2 reales. We have a woman bust looking to the left. And of course, the question here is, who is that woman? And what we need to remember is that this is, by the way, sorry about that, I skipped one. These are the same Costa Rican coinage countermark without the lattice mark. And so the question is, who is this woman? And it has been speculated that it was Queen Victoria. And the reason that it was Queen Victoria is because Costa Rica at the moment was trading with England more than any other country. We were sending our gold. We were sending our rich kids to study in Scotland and England to become engineers and doctors. And I gave a talk in this group about 10 years ago about the Montealegre family that ran from Costa Rica in a coup d'etat. Some of those guys that end up in San Francisco were trained in England as engineers and doctors, brothers. And this is a beautiful also 1776 coin with the Costa Rican countermark. And these are different coins with the lattice countermark. You see that here on top of the Costa Rican, the Costa Rican countermark on top of the lattice countermark. I took these pictures on the right shamelessly from Heritage Auctions. The rest are mine. But this one, I thought it was a beautiful example. I couldn't pass it on. I also bid on that and I lost big time. So, okay. The third countermark that we have is the one that deals with our beautiful city of San Francisco. I am not going to dwell too much on this particular countermark because I know Michael Wenner gave a talk, I believe, about 3 or 4 months ago or something like this, about the Blue Wing Hotel, the associated hangings, the vigilante committee happenings in regards to that. But the J.T. Jones, you can see that here, San Francisco, J.T. Jones, corner of Montgomery and Commercial Street. It had to do with the Blue Wig Salon. It is believed that it was a gambling house more than a place where you would drink. These were not trade tokens, according to the people I have talked to, because they were more of a presentation tokens. Okay. We know that there is a newspaper announcement there where they indicate that some of these coins were given away as consolation prizes for a raffle that Mr. Jones organized. Let me check on something here because okay. All right. Blue Wing Salon. Michael says that I should say the Blue Wing Salon. All right. Thank you, Michael. The countermark was applied to any silver coin and taken as face value. So remember, this is San Francisco, right in the middle of the gold rush. Anything goes. It is said that there is only a 1 gold coin with this countermark. I have never seen a picture, and unlike Bill, I have never held it on my hand either. So I don't know. I don't know where that coin is. Never seen it in my life. I don't know what the dimension of this is, but I think at the picture, Michael Werner's background could give us a clue. So, so what does that look like? Well, that particular countermark was also mentioned in an article in the Numismatist in 1916, volume 32, by none other than our founder, Farran Ser. Although there is a small mistake, they describe this as a Mexico Mint 2 reales 1810. That would have been impossible. There is no Mexican pieces countermark unless you show me one, a countermark with the lattice countermark. And this is the San Francisco piece. What you see here is the J.T. Jones countermark on top of the lattice piece. I don't know of any other I don't know of any other, I should say, Lattice countermark related to San Francisco, and certainly not with the countermark of the J.T. Jones piece. It is obvious that here the Lattice piece was put in there first because the countermark, the Jones countermark, is on top of that one. So timeline plays well. What really doesn't play well is that the pieces that I have seen with the Jones countermark are very well centered. And I think if you look at Michael Werner's background right now, he has behind him a beautiful piece. I don't have one because I knew he was going to put that one. So I decided not to bother. But if you look at it, it's a very well-centered piece. I'm just kidding, of course. I just was too lazy to find one, but because I don't have one. This is the only one that I have. I didn't want to go to the internet. But so if you see that, this is not a Mexico piece. This is a Bellon piece. And so again, this is a very, I guess, unique that you has a San Francisco Cuban Cuban flavor on it. So
And
we
that,
go back.
That was your piece, Federico?
Say that again?
In your collection?
That is in my collection, yes. This one, right? Well, actually, I don't mean to. I just want to clarify. I rarely use, unless I ask somebody for pictures. So everything you see here belongs to me, except the heritage piece. I couldn't make that one.
It had been in Ron Lurch's collection.
This was probably in Ron Lurch's collection, yeah, because I got it from somebody who was dealing with that. Well, okay. So, so how did that Cuban piece get to San Francisco? Right? So coins travel with people. They don't travel by themselves. Or like I say up there in the title of that thing, how did the coin cross? How did the coin cross to the east, so to speak? We don't know. It could have been on any of these routes. I suspect more likely something like this, and then up north, just because this route, Cuba to Florida and then to San Francisco, hard to believe at the moment. So I suspect that this piece traveled through the Panamanian Isthmus or the Nicaraguan Isthmus or the Nicaraguan route. It's not an isthmus. Or it might have well been that it went from Cuba to somewhere here on the East Coast and then it traveled back there, although I seriously doubt it. So that is my presentation for today. And I want to thank you for your attention. I will take any questions now.
Thank you, Federico.
You're welcome.
So the Blue Wing Saloon was famous because it's involved with the start of the Vigilance Committee. Casey was the one who shot James King of William, but the other guy that was hung was Cora, and Cora murdered a guy named Richardson, and they had some words prior to the murder at the Blue Wing Saloon. But and I've forgotten who wrote this article. Someone's made a big discovery about this that's going to be in Talking Tokens maybe this month, that Jones ran a lottery kind of thing and gave these out as prizes. And Jones' dates are prior to 1856 and these crimes. So the connection's a little it's there, but the dates don't quite line up. So Jones wasn't running the Blue Wing Saloon when Cora and Richardson had it out.
Yeah, I decided not to mention that, one, because Michael just had a presentation about that, and second, because to be honest, that was not the argument that the thing that I was relating here. But I also did some search, Michael, starting with the links that you sent me, and I just couldn't follow anymore about the dates lining up and so on and so forth. So
It is probably, well, it's certainly one of the most desirable counterstamps from early California, because it is 1850s for sure.
Cool.
Federico, I remember reading a while back that Spain would take the well-worn silver coins, counterstamp them, and then send them off to their other colonies, such as in the Philippines and East Indies and other island nations around the world. I know the Philippines is a crown with a 7 under it for the most part. They have some other ones. But I haven't seen any of the lattice works and the other counterstamp coins that they ship around the world, basically. Is there any world that they did that?
No, I actually don't believe. I believe that if you look, for example, at the Costa Rican example, that countermark was done in Costa Rica. I think what happened was the Spanish had such a huge financial and economic influence around the world, literally speaking, that their coins, for all fairness, most of them well made. There were some cheating going on in some of the mints, and for that the assigners and the directors of the mint were hanged or decapitated by the king. But for the most part, the coins were on weight and on diameter and dimensions, and they would be used around the world. So I don't know if they were countermarked and then shipped. I think it was the other way around. They just happened to be in a place. The number achieved a particular mass or critical number, and before everybody got upset with each other, they said, okay, we're just gonna legitimize these coins. We're gonna make them valid, and that's exactly the way it went, I think. You were referring to that kind of process, I hope, or?
No, I'm just curious because I know that there's a number of counterstamps on Spanish A reales in particular around the planet. And I remember reading an article quite some time back that the Spanish would wait till it's fairly well worn and then ship it off to all their colonies in other parts of the world and counterstamp it for the use of those locations. So
okay,
I don't know how many colonies or how many counterstamps there are.
So I'm going to say only this. The Spanish did not like to have coins from the colonies circulating in Spain.
Yeah.
There were no happy campers about that. And to be honest, the people who live in the colonies, they did not like the coins from Spain either. They did not have a good political symbol. We were talking people who were oppressing them and whatnot. They were not particularly happy. So at least in the Americas, between the Americas and Spain, the exchange of coins was not heavy. I don't know with colonies like the Philippines, for example, how that worked. I have never read about it, but I can tell you that between the Americans and the the motherland in Spain, coin exchange or the king, I just don't imagine the king sending a bunch of worn out coins to the colonies. I think that they will be not very well accepted. Yeah. Or the other way around.
There's a substantial number of coins from South America and Central America that were sent to the Philippines and counterstamped there. It's actually a fairly substantial number.
Right.
They were always the crown with the 7 for the most part underneath of it. There were some of the earlier ones that had a slightly different counterstamp. But it was sort of their way of creating coinage for the Philippines without having to actually mean anything.
Well, that's a talk for you. How about next month, man?
Well, I only have a couple of them.
Not to put you on the spot here, but
yeah,
we already have
there's other things I should be talking
month.
about actually. And those Central American and South American coins were legal tender in the United States. So what, the 1850s sometime, 1852, 1857, something like that.
Right.
Well,
right.
It certainly, as a matter of fact, it was the basis of the American coinage, right? Alexander Hamilton took something like 274 Spanish A reales and weighed them and decided that was the weight divided by 274 for the American dollar, which turned out to be slightly light because all the coins he used were really well worn. But it's always an interesting thing.
Yeah. Thanks, Dan. I wonder if anybody else has a comment or a question about this.
Well, they're free to ask.
Yeah, I do have one, Federico. I'm interested why there's no U.S. coins that were countermarked. Was it just because that Cuba had issues with Spain, or was it they just ignored the U.S. or didn't care? Because there was a lot of trade that went on in the 1820s, 30s, 40s, 50s.
Sure. It's called, I would say that you mean with the Lattice countermark specifically, right?
Correct.
I don't know of any, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. I have here with me somewhere where I am, oh, right there. So I'm not gonna get up to touch, but I have an article written by Cubans in 1950 about the Lattice countermark, and there are not US coins listed. So I would doubt that they exist. That was a publication by the Cuban numismatic something or something back then. So the reason I don't know. You have to remember that if at the moment that the countermark was made, Cuba was of course under Spanish rule, and the Spanish and the United States were never friendly with one another in relation to Cuba. And if the circulation of Sevilla coins, meaning motherland coins in Cuba, was not well seen, I just do not. I will find a difficult to find a word to describe how badly it would be seeing a U.S. coin circulation. So yeah, so I would think it's a political thing mostly.
Okay. And any idea the population of these lattice countermarked coins?
I don't think we heard you.
No, I do not have it. I'm sorry.
Uh-oh. Hung up again.
If I could jump in here with a comment about the absence of these on US coins, keep in mind that during the first half century of US coin production, US coins were a rarity in the United States, not just around the world, but in the United States, because in spite of them having intentionally been made slightly light compared to the Spanish dollar, they were extremely heavy compared to almost everything else that was circulating in the Western Hemisphere.
Right.
With the result that they were being exported to European destinations as fast as they could be obtained from the mint and melted because their silver value was too high compared to European coins.
Yeah.
And so early US silver is extremely scarce, even for collectors in this country, but was extremely rare in circulation in the Western Hemisphere until in the late 1850s, Congress decided to up the production of coinage and disallow the legal tender status of all the foreign coins. And at that point, US coins started circulating in the United States. Prior to that, they were almost impossible to get in areas around the United States.
Sure enough.
There's a number of things written that say that the Portuguese court in exile in Brazil actually overstamped a number of the 1804 American silver dollars, but I've never seen one either in a picture or anywhere else. But all the books claim that there's still some number of them out there somewhere.
Well, you won't see any of them because none of the 1804 dollars were actually minted prior to the time that Brazil started overstriking things.
Because I don't think they started overstriking until 1816 or somewhere thereabouts, right? When the
Well, the 1830s was when they started officially overstriking things, but the 1804 dollars hadn't been struck at that time.
Right.
okay.
Talk about your dates. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, one other one, and maybe somebody knows the answer while we're waiting, hopefully for Federico to get back on. So the Costa Rica counterstamp, is there an idea of when the time frame was for that counterstamp? It obviously seemed to be on top of the Lattice countermark. So I'm just wondering if this was done same time frame or was it done 20 years later?
Are you asking me if the Costa Rican countermark was done on top of the Cuban Lattice countermark? The answer is yes. It was
Okay,
done later.
Also, he
same
wanted
time
to-
period? Or was it a different time period?
No, the Costa Rican countermark was done in 1850, 1852, I believe. It is on my PowerPoint presentation. I can go back and see it, but yes.
Okay.
Cool. Any other questions?